Why has the most talented person you know still done nothing with their life? Why has that friend who was always the class genius, the one who could play any instrument by ear, ace tests without studying, the one everyone said was destined for greatness, remained in the exact same spot 10 years later? Why are you, knowing full well what you're capable of, still putting off the moment to prove it? The answer isn't laziness. The answer isn't a lack of opportunity, and it definitely isn't other people's luck. Carl Jung spent his life studying this exact phenomenon. What he discovered is unsettling. There is a type of person who sabotages their own talent with surgical precision, and the worst part is, they don't even realize they're doing it. Over the next few minutes, you will hear the story of a man named Raphael, a boy born with a rare gift, a gift everyone else could see, except him. You will understand why unused talent doesn't just fade away, it turns into something else, and it lies in wait for the right moment to collect the debt. Before we continue, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below. What is that one project, that dream, that idea you've held on to for years and still haven't started? I want to read every single response. Now back to the video. A long-term study tracked hundreds of children identified as gifted over several decades. The findings disturbed many people at the time. Being labeled talented in childhood had almost no correlation with success achieved in adulthood. Many of these kids, the brightest of their generations, simply vanished along the way. No tragedy, no accident. They just stopped growing. This isn't an anomaly. It's practically a silent rule. Carl Jung recognized this pattern in his consulting rooms decades before formal studies confirmed it. He treated brilliant, capable patients overflowing with potential, who lived trapped in an eternal waiting room, always on the verge of starting, never actually beginning. Jung referred to the energy driving human life as libido, not in Freud's narrow sexual sense, but as life force itself. The psychic energy that pushes you to create, build, and become who you are capable of being. He discovered a fundamental truth about this energy. It doesn't vanish when left unused. It accumulates. It builds pressure. Eventually, it finds an outlet. Sometimes an outlet that destroys everything you spent years trying to protect. Raphael was one of those cases. His story illustrates better than any abstract theory why unused talent becomes a prison. Let's look into that story right now. Raphael was 7 years old when he sat at a piano for the first time. Nobody taught him. His aunt had an old upright in the living room, kept more as furniture than an instrument. Curious, Raphael started pressing the keys. Within 20 minutes, he was playing a song he had heard on the radio that morning. His aunt went silent. Then she called his mother into the room. Then she called the neighbors. "This boy is a genius," they said. Raphael grew up hearing that sentence on repeat. At family gatherings, he was seated at the piano to show off his gift. In school, music teachers held him up as an example for the rest of the class. By 14, he was composing complete melodies by ear without ever studying formal music theory. Everyone around Raphael was certain of one thing: that boy was going to make it big. Here is the detail nobody caught back then. Raphael never finished anything. He would start a piece, play the first 2 minutes for someone, soak in the praise, and never return to complete it. He filled an entire notebook with musical ideas, half-written lyrics, and melodies that still needed tweaking, only for that notebook to sit inside a drawer. By 23, Raphael had enough material to record a full-length album. His talent was recognized by veteran musicians, he had industry contacts, and an interested producer ready to work. Even so, nothing ever materialized. Whenever someone asked, "So, when is the album coming out?" Raphael had an answer ready. "It's not quite there yet. I need to polish 3 more tracks. The timing just isn't right." The strange part was that these excuses sounded entirely reasonable, even to him. Pause here for a second and reflect honestly. Is there something in your life you've been describing as almost ready for over a year? A project you claim you're just finalizing the details on? A course you'll finish once you have more time? A business idea that's just waiting for the right moment? Write that project down right now. Put its name on a piece of paper, in your phone's notes app, wherever. Because this specific project is going to matter for the rest of this video. Hold on to it. We'll return to it shortly. Jung wrote a line that perfectly captures what was happening to Raphael, even though he never met him. He noted that a powerful talent casts its shadow long before it ever fully manifests. In real terms, a gift never arrives alone. It always carries a hidden counterweight. And the greater the gift, the darker the shadow walking beside it. Think about it this way. A rare ability develops at the expense of other traits. While Raphael spent hours playing the piano, he wasn't developing a tolerance for criticism. He wasn't learning how to sustain effort when results aren't immediate. He wasn't building the confidence required to release something flawed into the world and endure the inevitable judgment. He possessed immense talent in one domain, and an equally massive void right beside it. This is the core issue Jung emphasized. The wider the gap between talent and maturity, the more dangerous the combination becomes. The area where you are most gifted, paradoxically, becomes the area where you are most vulnerable. A critique of Raphael's music hurt far more than any other criticism in his life, because that piano wasn't just a hobby. It was his entire identity. It was the sole proof that he was special. His unconscious mind found a workaround: protect the gift by keeping it safely locked in the realm of almost. As long as the album isn't released, no one can call it bad. As long as the music remains unheard, it stays, in his mind, the greatest thing he will ever create. Jung called this psychic compensation. The mind finds a way to shield whatever it cannot afford to lose, and the most effective way to shield talent from judgment is to never let it enter the world completely. Raphael thought he was being a perfectionist. In reality, he was being protected by a part of himself he didn't even know existed. Remember the project you wrote down in the previous chapter? Ask yourself this question with brutal honesty. What happens the day that project is launched, seen, delivered, and someone says they didn't like it? Sit with that feeling for a moment. Feel the discomfort that surfaces just from imagining the scene. That discomfort has a name. It carries more weight than any deadline, any lack of time, or any practical excuse you've ever used. Hold on to that sensation. It will matter in just a moment. A developmental psychologist from Columbia University spent years studying what she termed the eternal potential syndrome in gifted youth. According to her findings, children labeled as talented too early develop an anxious relationship with their own output, because falling short of expectations feels like a direct betrayal of their identity. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology tracked creative professionals across various fields and identified a direct correlation. The higher the perceived skill level among peers, the higher the rate of chronic procrastination on personal projects. The primary driver identified by researchers wasn't a lack of ability, but fear of definitive evaluation. A psychiatrist specializing in Jungian therapy summarized the dynamic. Talent establishes an expectation carried from an early age. There is profound safety in being seen as someone full of potential, compared to the terrifying finality of being seen as someone who has already shown everything they have. At 28, Raphael received an offer he couldn't turn down. A respected independent label offered to fully fund the recording of his album. Studio paid for. Veteran producer attached. A 3-month deadline to deliver the finished masters. There was no more room for, "It's not quite there yet." Raphael walked into the studio on day 1 energized. By day 2, an inexplicable tightness gripped his chest. By week 2, he was rewriting the same track for the 10th time, telling the producer something was missing, unable to articulate what it actually was. The producer, a patient man, began noticing the pattern, Every time a song approached completion, Raphael found an excuse to tear it apart and start over. By the end of the second month, with the deadline closing in, Raphael had virtually nothing finalized. Late one night, alone in the studio, the collapse happened. Sitting at the piano, the instrument that had defined his entire existence, he couldn't play a single note. His hands froze, his chest tightened. He would later describe the feeling as if the entire foundation of his identity was cracking beneath him. Raphael wasn't afraid of writing a bad song. He was terrified of writing the best song of his life, releasing it, and discovering the absolute ceiling of his talent. As long as the album didn't exist, his potential remained limitless. It was everything everyone had ever promised it would be. The moment he released that record, the fantasy died. Either the record validated everything said about him, or it proved, once and for all, that he wasn't that special after all. Living with infinite possibility felt safer than facing a definitive answer. Raphael walked out of the studio that night and didn't return for an entire week. Raphael's breakdown points to a universal psychological barrier, confronting the real ceiling. As long as you never test your actual limits, they remain limitless in your imagination. The moment you test them, they turn into a concrete reality. Ask yourself, would you rather live with an imaginary, infinite potential or a real limit, even if it falls short of the fantasy? Don't rush your answer. That question sits at the center of everything we're discussing here. During that week away, drained of all energy, Raphael pulled an old book from a shelf at his parents' house, a vintage volume of Carl Jung, purchased decades earlier for reasons long forgotten. He opened it at random and stopped on a passage detailing the concept of individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are, rather than who others expect you to be. Jung wrote that this process demands something most people spend their lives avoiding: accepting total responsibility for what you are genuinely capable of doing. Raphael read that passage 3 times. For the first time, he had a name for what he had been experiencing for years. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't poor discipline. It was the sheer fear of shedding the identity of the promising kid to become, once and for all, simply the man who made a specific album, flaws, critiques, and reality included. Jung called the social mask, people construct the persona. For talented individuals, this mask often takes a specific shape, the identity of someone perpetually on the verge of doing something great. That identity provides comfort. It delivers recognition, positive anticipation, and admiration from others, without demanding the vulnerability that real creation requires. Raphael had lived his entire life behind that mask. Deep down, he knew the maintenance came at a steep cost. Jung wrote that no one can live inauthentically without paying a psychological toll. In Raphael's case, that toll was a life suspended in place, shining only as a projection inside other people's minds. He finally realized he wasn't afraid of failing. He was terrified of actually succeeding and realizing there were no excuses left. There is an aspect of this discovery that rarely gets discussed. Jung documented what happens when talent remains suppressed for too long without a real outlet. He analyzed the case of a man who channeled his entire energy into a single narrow domain, neglecting the rest of his life. When that energy hit a dead end, it turned inward. The man developed severe somatic anxieties, recurring breakdowns, and a form of self-sabotage that seemed to operate on its own accord. Suppressed energy does not disappear, it mutates, and more often than not, it turns destructive. Raphael realized the physical symptoms he had endured for months. The insomnia, the chest pressure, the unprovoked irritability weren't random occurrences. They were the bill coming due. Starting that week, guided by a Jungian therapist, Raphael began applying 4 practical shifts. These are the same 4 shifts you can implement starting today. Movement 1. Name the mask. The first step was acknowledging out loud which identity he was protecting. He wrote on a piece of paper, "I am seen as the guy with a rare gift, and I am terrified of losing that identity." It sounds simple, but writing it down pulls the mechanism out of the shadow and places it in the light. Whatever is brought into consciousness loses its hidden power. Take a sheet of paper and write down: what identity are you protecting by leaving your work unfinished? The idea guy? The person who is naturally good at everything? The one with endless potential? Be completely honest. Movement 2. Set an irreversible deadline. Raphael recognized that as long as delaying remained an option, his mind would always choose to delay. Following his therapist's advice, he publicly committed to an album release date with people he respected, leaving zero room to back out. This establishes what Jung termed containment, an external boundary that forces bottled-up energy outward instead of letting it spin internally without direction. If you have a stalled project, set a firm date and communicate it to someone else. Don't keep deadlines in your head. Private commitments are too easy to break. Movement 3. Deliberately deliver imperfect versions. This proved to be Raphael's hardest hurdle. His therapist instructed him to intentionally share raw, unfinished drafts of his music with others, not the final master, the rough cut. The goal wasn't perfection, it was conditioning his nervous system to survive external feedback before everything felt ready. The truth is, nothing ever feels ready to someone terrified of the outcome. Take a piece of your stalled project and show it to someone today, unfinished. Sit with the discomfort and realize you survive it. Movement 4. Separate identity from outcome. Finally, and most importantly, Raphael learned to disconnect his worth as a person from the reception of that album. The record could turn out great, mediocre, or a complete commercial failure. None of those outcomes defined who he was as a human being. This detachment lies at the heart of Jungian individuation. No longer relying on the external world to validate your worth through a specific result, and acting from a place of self-definition regardless of the outside verdict. Over the next 3 days, follow these steps in this exact order. Day 1. Write down the identity you protect by not finishing your project. Day 2. Set a firm completion or launch date and tell at least one person. Day 3. Share an imperfect, unfinished version of that project with someone, despite the discomfort. These 3 days won't finish the project for you, but they will break the internal loop keeping it stalled. Raphael released the album 4 months after that midnight breakdown in the studio. It wasn't flawless. He recognized weaknesses in at least 2 tracks. Some reviews were harsh. One critic wrote that the record showed potential that might be better explored later in the artist's career. Words that would have devastated him a year prior. Yet the work existed. The album was out in the real world. Raphael could listen to it, perform it live, and watch strangers sing the lyrics he had written. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just the promising kid who might do something great one day. He was the man who had actually done it. The insomnia stopped. The chest tightness disappeared. The persistent, unprovoked irritability vanished. The blocked energy had finally found a legitimate outlet. Raphael experienced firsthand what Jung outlined in theory. Talent does not demand perfection. It demands movement. And imperfect movement is infinitely healthier than static perfection that never leaves the page. Here is the question for you. What are you treating as infinite potential in your life that is actually just a project terrified of becoming real? Do you want to remain forever the person who could do great things? Or are you willing to become someone who actually made something, flaws, criticisms, and reality included, and finally discover your true ceiling? Raphael's story starts with a piano played by chance at 7 years old. It nearly ended with an entire lifetime of talent locked away in a drawer, shielded by a persona he didn't even realize he wore. What saved Raphael wasn't stricter discipline, more free time, or waiting for the stars to align. What saved him was recognizing that talent and shadow always travel together. The greater the gift, the deeper the fear underneath. The mind protects what it values most by keeping it safe from actual critique. Unused energy doesn't disappear. It turns into insomnia, anxiety, and quiet self-sabotage until it finds a release. He named the mask. set hard deadlines, accepted imperfection, and finally separated his identity from the outcome of his work. Carl Jung dedicated his work to a central truth. Becoming who you truly are requires accepting total responsibility for what you are capable of doing, even while part of you resists it. You don't need to eliminate fear before taking action. You simply need to act while the fear is still there. There are only two types of talented individuals: those who carry the permanent weight of what they could have done, and those who carry the lighter burden of having actually tried. Only one of those burdens builds anything of value. Which of the two are you ready to carry from this point on? If this script resonated with you and you saw parts of your own journey in Raphael's story, leave a like below and subscribe to the channel to support more deep dives like this. Comment below. Which of the 4 movements are you going to implement first this week? I'll be reading every response. To continue this path of self-inquiry, click on the video appearing on the end card right now. Remember to apply these lessons to your life. Watching alone changes nothing without execution. Thank you for your time. See you in the next video.